Biohackers and longevity experts, you've been selected to be exposed.
Over the last 3 years, I've spent millions of dollars on a protocol.
If you don't know who Andrew Huberman is, that won't be the case for long.
I just want to know what the science says, and I've been practicing nutritional medicine for 30 years.
Vitamin K2, alpha lipoic acid. I take cocovia, just beneficial. It's important.
With biohacking hitting the mainstream, there's a lot of money and marketing trying to convince you that you need to read 1,000 PubMed studies a day and take 50 different supplements to stay healthy. It's time for a reality check. If you're following advice from people like Bryan Johnson, Hyman, Andrew Huberman, or Dr. Rhonda Patrick, you've been scammed into the intellectual masturbation corner of the health and nutrition world. These people are absolute experts at making very simple stuff sound extremely complex and quote, scientific. This is how they get you. They hide behind a wall of PhDs, peer-reviewed studies, and confusing scientific jargon to make it seem like they know a lot more about health and the human body than they actually do. It's time to call this out. The emperor has no clothes. Today I'm going to react to some of these people's advice and daily routines to show you that they've just become the glorified priest of the modern health world, treated much like the medieval priest who pushed the quote, peer-reviewed holy words that no one dares question and which you couldn't ever possibly figure out on your own. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So let's just get straight into it. We're going to start off with the guy who is probably the craziest of the bunch, the longevity biohacking wizard, Bryan Johnson, who has spent a lot of money on this. So let's see what he's up to.
Diagnosed with hypothyroidism when I was 21 years old. So I take levothyroxine and Armour Thyroid daily. I was taking levothyroxine for my TSH, which a lot of doctors primarily manage. But then I started looking at T3 and free T4 and found that the Armour Thyroid helped level things out. So I've been stable for some time, but it took me a while to figure out how to.
So this is kind of off topic in terms of what he's saying, but just take a look at this guy. It looks like he's actually aging faster than when he started this whole thing. I mean, he looks very, very malnourished. One of the easiest ways nowadays to tell if people are healthy is just to look at them. Like, look at Bryan Johnson. Do you really think all of his $1 million scientific equipment and everything he's doing in terms of biohacking is working when he looks like this? I mean, he clearly is malnourished. He's lacking sunlight severely. He's very pale. You can tell that his hair is very thin. That's basically a big sign of lack of protein. And basically his skin is also looking very rough, shall we say. So when we look at Bryan, we can clearly see that his body is suffering. What he's doing is not helpful for his health. It's probably not helpful for long-term longevity. And it's definitely not helpful for his fertility and all of that. But we'll talk more about that. Let's just finish this video.
To manage my thyroid, we recently scanned and it was of normal volume. I take 81 milligrams of aspirin 3 times a week. There was some good evidence on that. And then right before bed, I'll take my melatonin. I got diagnosed with...
Okay, so this video is basically him explaining the pharmaceuticals he took. He took aspirin as part of his longevity hack because there was some good research done on it. I'll be very curious who conducted that research. Sounds like it could have been some Rockefeller petroleum-based pharmaceutical funded entity. But yeah, we didn't really get much from this video. He also took melatonin. Melatonin is a very artificial way of inducing that hormone, which melatonin is. It's basically a biochemical hormone that regulates sleep and so on. Something which is made to be naturally excreted by our pineal gland and our other glands in our body. And when we have our body in order with the correct nutrition, we have the right diet, we are getting the right signals from the sun, which he's obviously not getting, then we actually produce our own natural melatonin and we are able to sleep much better and all of this. So he's basically living a very unnatural life and he's trying to compensate for the natural hormones that are supposed to arise in his body from high quality animal nutrition and sunlight. And he's trying to combat that with basically pharmaceuticals that is based on peer-reviewed science and melatonin, which is a very dangerous supplement for people to get into because it's basically like taking a form of steroids in a light way because your body will actually start to suppress the natural function of that hormone. So that means that if you're going to take a bunch of melatonin, your body is basically going to say to itself, oh great, I don't have to produce my own melatonin anymore, and you're going to be stuck on that supplement forever. This is why I never ever recommend people to take supplements like these that impact our whole hormonal functions, and our hypothyroid issues should really not be solved this way. Bryan Johnson, he clearly has severe hypothyroid issues. He clearly has severely hormonal issues, and he's trying to fix that with artificial synthetic drugs and that's just going to lead him towards a route where he's going to be dependent on this for his entire life. So this is actually kind of sad to see. It's kind of sad to see how deteriorating he is. I really hope he turns it around and get some better practices going. But let's go to the next video.
I started Project Blueprint, and the objective of this was to measure every organ of my body and then ask it what it needs to be in ideal health. What you see here.
So again, what does this mean? You want to ask every organ. This is a very sort of split up, materialistic, scientific view of the human body. We already have processes inside of our mind and body and everything that tells our body exactly what it needs from its food. That's why you can, when you get on a natural diet and you are more in tune with nature, you are grounding, you are outside in the sun, your body will give you much more impulses towards what you should eat. Oh, I'm craving meat, I'm craving this, I'm craving that. Your body is very good at finding that out on its own. You don't have to go into $1 million scientific machine to figure this stuff out. Again, in my opinion, a very, very wrong view of how you're supposed to be healthy. It's basically like, to me, it's almost a psychotic disconnect from nature, that we are sort of afraid to actually get back in touch with our natural signals and let them sort of take us wherever they want, and we think that everything is in our control. With our amazing technologies, we are going to hack our way to good health. Again, I think this is a psychotic disconnection that many people have in terms of health. We see it in the medical industry and all of this, but also in terms of what Bryan is doing is like the amplified version of that, in my opinion. But let's see what else he's doing here.
Here in front of me, this food is the diet that is produced near perfect biomarkers. When I wake in the morning,
so it has produced perfect biomarkers, but what does that mean? That's basically just numbers on a piece of paper. I mean, if we look at Bryan, we can clearly see that his biomarkers are not perfect. So again, he's going off of what he sees on the scientific record. He's not going off of his own experience, basically, because I don't believe that he's thriving as much as his biomarkers are showing.
This is the green giant, which has collagen peptides, cinnamon, creatine, amino acids, and I take around 60 pills.
60 pills. Okay, so he's basically doing like a green smoothie type of thing with amino acids, peptides, creatine, and when you break those things down that he puts in there, he's basically trying to replicate meat, because meat has a complete profile of creatine, amino acids, everything that your body would need, and he's trying to sort of take all of that apart and deconstruct it down into petroleum-based supplements, put them into a green smoothie. He's trying to recreate meat within a smoothie, basically. This is just an insane way of viewing health, in my opinion. He takes 60 supplements. I don't want to go into all of those supplements. I'm sure we could find his list somewhere, but that would be a very long video, basically a video in itself. And again, if you think you're on the most perfect biomarker, scientific, peer-reviewed diet, why are you taking 60 supplements? Shouldn't your food be giving you all the nutrition you need if you're on this highly optimized diet? I find that very strange mindset. I don't understand how he sort of explains that to himself, but let's see what he's actually eating.
I'll work out for an hour, and then I'll eat this, the super veggie, broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, black lentils, garlic, and ginger. And
so what was that again? It was
broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, black lentils, garlic.
Broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, black lentils. That is one of the hardest meals for your gut to ever digest that I've ever seen, because he is eating all of this raw. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried to eat raw broccoli and raw cauliflower. That's not a pleasant experience. It doesn't taste nice. It is not going to make your stomach feel nice, and that's because it's full of fibers, indigestible plant matter. And for some reason, he's scammed himself into believing, from probably scientific peer-reviewed stuff, that this is actually good for your body and health, but you're just not able to digest any of that. If he would just boil this meal, it would at least be digestible. He would still get no nutrition from the plant-based thing he's doing here. But if you try to eat a boiled broccoli or cauliflower, you'll notice it's much nicer taste. It's much easier to digest, because the boiling process, all the heat, and basically breaks it down, makes it able to be digested for your stomach. So this is a very terrible meal for your gut health, and there's basically no nutrition either. He's using black lentils, again, full of phytic acid, full of plant defense chemicals that really mess up your gut. Sort of has a very negative effect on the way your body absorbs minerals and how your hormones work. This is a very anti-nutrient rich dish that I don't recommend anyone eating. So this is a terrible meal, just full of plant-based indigestible fiber. He's not even cooking anything to make it be able to be digested. He's probably eating the black lentils for protein. But as I've talked about many times, your body is not able to absorb protein from lentils in the same way as it is from meat or eggs. For example, if you eat a steak and you get that steak into your stomach, the protein from that steak is going to be much easier digested by your stomach and turned into bioavailable protein within your body, because the steak from the cow is basically much closer to your bodily tissue. But if you think about a bean or a lentil, the protein from that stuff is very far compared to a steak to what your bodily tissue is made up of. So the protein of beans and lentils and all this is a big scam, because it's just nowhere near the same absorption rate. And I don't think Bryan has looked into that science, because there is a lot of science proving that as well. So again, I find it hard to justify this meal in any way whatsoever.
And ginger, and I'll drizzle extra virgin olive oil.
So he uses extra virgin olive oil. I have no problems with that. I wonder if he's going organic and everything with his stuff. That would at least be a little plus. The extra virgin olive oil is actually probably the best plant fat that we could consume. You don't want to heat it or anything, because it's going to oxidize, cause issues within your body. But obviously it's extra virgin, so minimally processed. So that's probably what's holding his whole world together, is that olive oil, the small amount of beneficial fat he's getting from that. At least that's kind of helpful.
And also 100% dark chocolate.
100% dark chocolate doesn't taste nice. It does have a good amount of minerals. Again, it has some decent plant fats. Again, one of the lesser evils in terms of plant fats. So again, I could understand that part. But again, there's a lot of misconceptions with this meal, and just adding a little bit of olive oil and dark chocolate is not going to take this meal to any heights where you can actually get nutrition from it. And again, you can see he's looking very malnourished, very thin hair and all of this. So he's basically malnourishing himself slowly from this process, and maybe he'll take that as him aging slower, because his body is basically in such a low vibration that it can't even live. He's basically afraid to live. That's how I see it, and that's why he eats basically nothing. And the things he eats gives his body basically zero energy and zero nutrition. So this is just an abomination of a diet, in my opinion. Let's see the rest of this video.
Hour later, I'll eat nutty pudding, which is macadamia nuts, flaxseed, walnuts, berries, and pea protein.
Macadamia nuts and basically a nut pudding. So again, not the worst thing in the world. You can understand that he's craving all this fat from the nuts. But if he would just eat some animal fat, he's gonna satisfy that craving much more. But he's basically trying to up the calories with this meal, trying to make a plant-based, calorie-rich meal, which is very hard, because as you know, plants have much lower energy and much lower calories than a lot of animal foods like butter, eggs, and all of that. So again, not the worst thing in the world, but because he's using all these nuts and flax seeds, again full of anti-nutrients, it's a very hard meal for your gut to digest. Bryan Johnson, I mean, when you think about it, probably has a lot of gut issues. He's absorbing maybe 10 to 20% of the nutrition that the scientific paper says are in these meals. So very malnourished diet. I don't recommend anyone ever try anything like this. It's a terrible way to live, basically. So please don't eat this.
And pomegranate seeds.
And pomegranate seeds, again, I have no problem with that. But again, there's no nutrition in there. I mean, it tastes nice. Probably has some phytochemical or something that he's trying to get in there. But again, your body's not going to absorb that. Your body needs real nutrition that it can actually use, bioavailable nutrition.
And I'll take the remaining pills of the day, which is around 40. There's a lot.
40, so he's taking 100 pills a day. I mean, this is just the most psychotic thing I've ever seen, I think. 100 pills. Those pills are probably not all gonna be perfectly just clean nutritional supplements. There's probably a lot of fillers. There's probably a lot of steroids and things in there, a lot of petrochemicals. So he's basically giving his body a lot of toxins to work through with 100 pills. Probably takes him like an hour to take those a day. And his liver and his kidneys and everything is going to detox all the toxins that he brings in from those pharmaceutically sterilized, produced nutritional supplements. Again, I don't recommend anyone to take this many supplements. In fact, I don't really recommend supplements in general. If you have a good diet and you have all your nutritional aspects and your lifestyle aspects in place, there are very few supplements that you need to take. There are some supplements that you can talk about on an individual basis, but this is just way overkill. And again, with supplements, you're absorbing a very low amount of it. Even the high grade supplements, very small amount is absorbed, because our body is basically used to synthesize nutrition and minerals and vitamins from the food, and it needs amino acids, it needs fatty acids, and all of these different compounds, enzymes, probiotics to actually turn that into nutrition, and you have none of those inside the pills. So your body just can't use it the same way as when it gets it from fruit. So this is a very unbalanced diet, and it's trying to compensate with like 100 supplement pills, and it's just not gonna work. And you can clearly see it's not working for him.
A lot of opinions about what one should eat, how one should exercise. The way we deal with this blueprint is we look at the data, we follow the scientific evidence, and then we just do this again and again.
We look at the data and all this, but again, what data is he actually looking at? That would be fun to talk about, but again, a long story. So let's just move on. I think that's enough Bryan Johnson. There's not really anything positive to say about his approach, in my opinion, and he's basically misunderstood everything about health and longevity, in my opinion. So let's look at some of the other experts in this field of biohacking and longevity and all of this. We're gonna move on to Dr. Rhonda Patrick, which I used to listen to back in the day. I found her very intellectual and she looked at all the studies, but basically when I've grown up a bit and gotten much more into nutrition and health, I realized that a lot of what I feel like she's saying is just making very simple stuff very complicated. So let's see what she's trying to say in this video.
Major diet rules I live by is I try to focus on getting as much of my micronutrients from food and as much protein from food as I can. And
just like any person on earth, basically, we're all trying to get nutrients and protein from our food. Obviously, it's what we need. So I'm not trying to just be negative and hate on her for no reason. I do generally think she's seems like a good human and she has some good ideas, but she's just always making very simple stuff like we eat for energy and nutrition. Obviously, everyone knows this, even children knows this, but she makes it sound like it's just this profound thing. And yeah, I find that kind of funny, but let's just finish this video.
Micronutrients being, of course, essential vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, right? And so foods that are high in those are not going to be processed, refined foods. They are going to be fruits, vegetables, whole foods, meats, fish, things like that. So really avoiding as much processed food as possible. When I think about food in a sense of this is supposed to provide me with vitamins and minerals and protein and omega-3, it makes it really easy to avoid processed foods because they don't have that stuff, right?
So that was kind of a weird video. I mean, she basically just told us to eat whole foods, to avoid refined foods and processed foods and all this. So I have no problems with that. But again, it makes it sound very intellectual and complicated. I think this is just a very simple thing that most of us already understand, more or less intuitively. So yeah, I don't know, this was a weird one. Let's just move on to the next one.
Evidence that eating things like compounds that are like sulforaphane or broccoli sprouts, which have like up to 100 times more sulforaphane than broccoli, are activating glutathione in the brain.
So she's saying that eating sulforaphane from broccoli and broccoli sprouts and all these, which is sulforaphane is basically a phytochemical that a lot of these people, especially Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I see talk about this a lot, that this phytochemical is just great for our brain health and everything because it activates glutathione. But I don't think she actually thinks about why this happens, because glutathione is basically your body's master antioxidant. It's a very positive compound when it comes to fighting inflammation and oxidation within the body, basically fighting toxins. So when we eat things like raw broccoli and broccoli sprouts, why do we get a boost of glutathione? That's basically because our body is trying to fight against something. It's basically trying to fight against the anti-nutrients and the very harsh indigestible things that we find in raw broccoli, because as you might have noticed, it doesn't taste nice, and that's a reason for that. It's our body telling us that there's something in there that it doesn't want. There's no nutrition it can get from it. It's basically just a minimal amount of like natural biotoxins in terms of anti-nutrients and plant defense chemicals in there. And that's, in my opinion, why we get a boost in antioxidant activity like glutathione. And this is what I think she kind of fails to see. She just looks at the paper and the science again, and she makes it very complicated and makes it sound like we need a lot of phytochemicals and all of these plant compounds, when in reality, it's not essential nutrition for our body. It's not something we need. Maybe there is a time and place where we can talk about stuff like that. But first of all, let's just focus on the essential nutrition, and let's focus on things that our body is actually able to utilize, which in my opinion would never be something like this. But let's just hear her out a bit.
Human evidence of that. I mean, that's amazing.
Can we cook the broccoli and still get these nutrients, or do we have to eat it raw? I confess, eating raw broccoli is really aversive to me.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Like, our body can't get anything out of raw broccoli. It's impossible. And it knows this. That's why it tastes like shit, basically. That's why kids, when you give them broccoli, they don't want to eat it. But if you give them a piece of meat, they'll eat that instantly. If you give them an egg yolk, they'll love it. If you give them raw cream, things like that they are able to synthesize and just directly absorb and turn into nutrition. That's what they like. That's what tastes good. That's how our body works. It doesn't like broccoli for a reason.
So the sulforaphane is formed from a compound called glucoraphanin, which is in the broccoli. And the enzyme that converts it into sulforaphane is myrosinase, and it's heat sensitive. So you do somewhat lower the sulforaphane levels when you cook the broccoli. However, there was a study a few years back that showed adding 1 gram of mustard seed powder, ground mustard seed powder, which also contains the myrosinase enzyme, to your cooked broccoli increases the sulforaphane by 4-fold. So there's
again, this is just very neurotic. We seem to think we have to find these magical potions, elixirs that will somehow turn on the enzyme to really get all the nutrition from the broccoli and all the plant chemicals. This is not how it works, in my opinion. You have to eat real food, and your body will do with that what it needs to do, like it has done for millions and millions of years. We don't have to find these strange and very weird biohacks that are always supported by some science that we never really see. But I guess she actually reads all of those studies, and this is what she takes away from it. But I disagree. This is not in any way going to change your health, and you're probably going to bring in a lot of natural flavonoids and toxins that's actually going to have to be detoxed by your liver and your kidneys and everything. So you're actually going to stress your body by trying these weird biohacks, like eating cooked broccoli with mustard seeds. And it's a very weird thing. I don't understand why people actually believe this, because if you would eat something like that, your body would be very repulsed towards it. So that's, in my opinion, just telling you exactly what's going on with these things. Your body is not able to digest any of it. There might be on the paper all these different phytochemicals and plant compounds in there that we can see under the microscope, but it doesn't work inside the body. There's a big difference between what's on the paper and what's bioavailable to your body, basically. So next up, we have some Andrew Huberman here, which I'm going to be honest, I haven't listened much to him, so I'm curious to see what he has to say. This is supposedly his morning routine, so let's see what he has to say.
Me, I tend to wake up sometime around 6 a.m., 6:30, and I write down the time in which I woke up. The second thing I do after I wake up is I make a beeline for sunlight. So getting outside for a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk is absolutely vital to mental and physical health.
This is great advice. This is a very good advice to just get out immediately when you wake up. Don't look at your phone. Go outside, get some sunlight on your skin. What he failed to say here is that you should actually find some place to walk barefoot on the earth, or at least put your hands on the earth or something, because that actually has a very positive effect on the electron swaps in your body. Because when you have slept inside of your house or apartment, you have basically become charged by a lot of the negative electromagnetic frequencies that are in our environment from our phones, routers, and everything. That is just inevitable. And when you walk out and stand with your bare feet on the earth, you're going to reset your whole bioelectrical features of your body, and you're also going to tap into your true circadian rhythm, as you can say. So your body sort of gets a bioelectrical signal from the magnetic field of the earth that sort of tells you, okay, this is the time and place I'm in. It's morning. I have to activate, for example, cortisol so I can be fresh in the morning and all this. So you can actually experience a profound boost in energy and stuff by straight away in the morning going out, grounding and all this. I do this every single day, and I never miss it because it's such an important part of my morning routine. So I think this is great advice, and he should have mentioned the grounding, in my opinion, because as I just said, it's a very good way of activating your circadian rhythm, and especially like a small coffee shot is what I call it, like a small espresso, just standing with your bare feet in the earth. If you start doing this, you'll notice it'll make you feel much better. So try it out. Let's see what else he has to say in this video.
We get back. I purposefully delay my caffeine intake to 90 minutes to 120 minutes after I wake up. So
again, very great advice. If you drink coffee, I'm not a big fan of coffee. I should do a video on coffee at some point to explain how you really should be doing coffee if you decide to drink it. But generally, this is good advice that he sort of gives his body time to wake up and activate its natural cortisol levels before he artificially increases it with something like coffee. So very good advice, and let's keep going.
For me, I just drink water. I also put a little bit of sea salt in the water. And I also drink my athletic greens, which is compatible with fasting. So I don't eat.
See, this is the issue I always have with Andrew Huberman. He seems to come with these like good inputs like he did in this video. And then he sort of starts shilling his own supplements that makes no sense when you look at everything else he's saying. So here he's talking about athletic greens. I actually remember looking at this supplement once, and it was like a terrible mixture of just, again, indigestible stuff that he just probably sells for profit. So let's actually take a look at athletic greens and see what's in there. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in here. Let's just go over it quickly. So first of all, we have acerola, which is basically a very powerful vitamin C compound. It is actually a positive compound, but when you powderize it like it is in this shake and you leave it on the shelf for a long time, it does lose a lot of its activity, so not really helpful. He basically has apple and a bunch of plant-based compounds. So this doesn't look like the worst thing, but also it's not gonna be anything that impacts your health in any way. At best, this is like a neutral sort of reaction your body will have towards this. Not really positive, not really negative. But with a lot of these things, I don't see any certified organic label or anything. So there could be a lot of basically agrochemicals and pesticides and problematic compounds in this shake from all of these different things. And also there are a lot of flavonoids and stuff like that, basically natural stuff from like the CoQ10, from ginger, that really can be stressful for your liver. So I think this is actually overall a very negative thing to take. And if you think about, again, this from a natural sense, when in nature would we ever come across this amount of like abundant and diversity shake kind of way of getting nutrients? It's just very unnatural, and it's not something that your body is able to utilize and turn into the things that these people say it is. And yeah, I guess he's kind of pushing this product to sell and make money, and that makes sense. But I would just wish that Andrew Huberman, because he does talk about some good stuff, that he would just sell some grass-fed butter, sell some ghee, sell something simple and natural that people can actually get benefits out of. Because this is just, in my opinion, at best it's neutral, at worst you're really stressing your liver and you're bringing a lot of toxins into your body. We could go over all these different compounds in themselves, but again, that would be a very long video. Let's just get back to the video and see what else he has to say.
Anything until about 11 a.m. or 12 noon. Next, I would do...
So he's basically doing intermittent fasting. Again, we're going to talk more about this in the later videos, I think, so I won't talk too much about it, but it is something that can be helpful shortly for some people, but I have a lot of issues with it, so let's just save that for later.
A 90-minute bout of work, and that's typically phone off and out of the room. You'd be amazed how much you can get done in 90 minutes if you are focused. After I finish, I do some form of physical exercise for about an hour. Very last, but certainly not least, deliberate cold exposure. And that's what I do each morning, and I'm certain that these tools work.
Okay, so that was not the worst thing. When we look at the Bryan Johnson and Rhonda Patrick stuff, this actually seems very sensible. There are some small issues, like I mentioned with the intermittent fasting. A lot of people nowadays, they are very low on nutrition because of the nature of our modern world, the nature of how many toxins we're exposed to, which really uptakes the amount of nutrients and minerals we need to detox those things. We have just not enough nutrition in our bodies to do the fasting in this way. Some people have, and they can get benefits from it shortly, but a lot of people would actually benefit much more from not doing the intermittent fasting. And again, as I said, we're going to talk about this more later in the next videos. He also talked about cold therapy. Again, this is a very hyped and very mainstream, almost nowadays, area of health, that you should all be doing cold therapy every day. And I have some issues with that, because what happens when we do cold therapy is basically like a stress to our system. And that's why a lot of these people, they basically get addicted to cold therapy, because it produces this adrenaline cortisol rush by our kidneys. It starts producing a lot of stress hormones basically, and that sort of alert feeling is something that people get very addicted to. So short term and like more inconsistently, I think cold therapy do have benefits, and I do it myself sometimes, but I do see a lot of people who are basically become addicted to cold therapy. And we have to remember, it's a form of stress. So when you induce too much stress in your body, and a lot of these people are also very hard-working workaholics, they also doesn't have the correct nutrition, they also drink a lot of coffee, which is against stress hormones. You're just compounding a lot of stress on your body by also doing cold therapy, which is a very intense form of stress. So there are a lot of issues with that you should stay away from, because long-term that could develop a lot of basically health issues for you, and a lot of compounding stress that's gonna give you different issues like low testosterone and increased fat storage. So this is a negative aspect of cold therapy that I feel like a lot of people are not talking about. And again, I could do a whole video on that at some point. But let's just get on with this. And again, as I said, Andrew Huberman, not too bad, but there are some small things here and there. Then we have this guy, Mark Hyman. Again, I've heard of him, but I haven't really ever heard about his principles and stuff. So let's see what he has to say.
Eating, if you don't eat for 12 or 14 or 16 hours a day, your body sees that as a little bit of a stress. Oh, there's no food. Let me activate all my healing systems to compensate for that. That is...
Again, this is kind of a misunderstanding. Again, we're getting into the intermittent fasting. As I just said, a lot of people today, they don't have the correct nutritional storage. They have too many toxins in their body to effectively do intermittent fasting. So the way he puts it is that the body sort of turns into a healing machine and there's no food in it, basically. And there are some studies and stuff that does show that your body sort of turns on, you could call it a quicker growth hormone rebuilding processes of the body when you are fasting. And that makes sense. It's sort of like when you want to heal a bone, you want to keep it rested and not move it around all the time for it to heal. It's the same with our gut. When there's no food that is needing to be digested and all of this, our body can sort of focus on different aspects of the body. So in that sense, there is a way that you can sort of heal your body by doing intermittent fasting. But again, as I said, you should never do this daily and you should never do this long term, in my opinion, because a lot of people, again, they're going to be inducing too much stress, and a lot of people have a lot of healing they need to do from the nutritional compounds that they get from food, from the animal products, from the animal fat that they need to get on a consistent basis to actually heal their issues and get back to have high energy levels, have high testosterone and all of this. So again, you're going to run into issues long term by just doing too much intermittent fasting, in my opinion.
The stress we know extends life more than any other known intervention. So if you restrict calories by 30%, you'll live 30% longer. I'm restricted eating. If you don't...
So if you restrict calories by 30%, you live 30% longer. There is sort of a energetic, almost spiritual way of viewing this, that obviously if you bring less energy into your body also has to work through and extract less energy, so your output is also going to be less. So if you eat 30% less calories, you live 30% longer lives. Again, I think this is a big misunderstanding. I would like to see the sort of studies that he's looking at to come to this conclusion. But again, there are a lot of things that we just can't see in these studies. So a lot of people, they're eating very toxic diets, they're eating very toxic food, they're not getting the correct nutrition from their food. So by all means, if they cut that out and just eat nothing, it might have a positive effect. But if you are not eating the wrong things and you're actually eating the correct nutrition, you're getting all the things your body needs in the correct order at the correct time, then you're actually going to live longer by eating more, in my opinion. It's not as black and white as he puts it out here. It's basically a misunderstanding, but let's move on to another video of Mark Hyman and see what he has to say.
Acne is a huge problem. It affects so many people. I know you've struggled with that, and you got rid of it by cutting out dairy.
I did, absolutely.
And sugar is the other big driver of acne. So that combo, sugar and dairy, is pretty bad for your microbiome. It tends to cause disruptions that lead to inflammation and acne. It can cause more dysbiosis or yeast overgrowth. So it can create a lot more problem. Acne is a huge...
So this was a very interesting video. And it's funny because what he says here is actually true, but I don't think he realizes why this is happening. So the reason that a lot of people nowadays get acne from dairy and sugar is basically because a lot of people today have gut dysbiosis. They're not able to extract the things that come into their gut. So with milk, for example, a lot of the dairy that people are consuming nowadays, whether it's milk or cream or butter, is pasteurized and ultra highly pasteurized. What this pasteurization process does is it destroys all the enzymes, all of the beneficial compounds that are in naturally occurring raw milk, which means that your body is then not able to absorb and digest the milk. So basically the problem we have with dairy is not a dairy problem, is that we need to get back to raw, real dairy that has enzymes and probiotics, and this is what he fails to mention here. It's not really a dairy problem, it's a pasteurization problem. So I have a documentary on my YouTube called Raw Milk, The Lost Elixir of Life, where I go in depth with all of this, so definitely take a look at that if you want the full story. And what he says with sugar, again, it's a similar sort of issue. It's not that our gut is not able to absorb sugar and turn it into energy. Actually, sugar is the most efficient form of energy, and if you have an optimized gut microbiome, you're actually able to use that sugar and turn it into very efficient energy. That's why I always talk about sugar can actually be a health food for you if you use it in the correct way, and obviously also in the correct dose. But a lot of people today that don't have an optimized gut, I would say 99% of people, they have gut dysbiosis, and because of this, they don't have enough enzymes and probiotics to turn that sugar in the gut into energy within the body very efficiently, and so it turns into yeast overgrowth and all of this. So again, this is a misunderstanding on the part of Mark Hyman here. It's not these foods and these food categories in particular that are the problem. It's the gut dysbiosis that we are all having that is the problem. So this is a very important thing to understand. It's something I constantly teach inside my health program, and with all the people I help, is we fix their gut, you're able to eat these things and you're able to get 10 times the nutrition from it. So this is probably the most important concept to understand in terms of modern nutrition and health nowadays, in my opinion. Something that just a lot of people miss. Like you can see this guy here, I think he's a doctor and he has all these PhDs, but he still hasn't figured out that the sugar and the dairy are not the problems. It's our gut and it's the way we process these foods that are the problems. So let's move on to the next video. So I don't really know who this guy is, if he's really anyone, but I just wanted to see what he has to say. So let's look at this video.
7 of my favorite free biohacking tips. Number 1, donate blood every 90 days.
Donate blood every 90 days. This is another very popular biohack that I see a lot, because a lot of people have sort of too high iron levels, or they have all these other issues that basically bloodletting and letting out blood can actually solve. So for some people, again, this can be helpful, but again, it's a sort of dangerous route to go down, because there is a lot of things that you need to know about all of your biomarkers to do this effectively. So I wouldn't say anyone should just go and donate blood. It's definitely for people who have very specific individual issues that they need to fix, and that they are then able to fix with something like bloodletting. So I won't go in depth with this right now, but just to say, I don't fully agree with what he says here, but again, I have seen people who actually benefited from doing this because of their specific scenario and their specific issues.
Especially men. Number 2, get 20 minutes of sunlight every morning.
Again, we talked about this with the Andrew Huberman. Great advice. Get sunlight, go out on ground every morning. Very important.
3, go for a 20-minute walk after eating your largest meal.
This is another misconception that I often see, that people think we should be active after eating our meal. But again, if you think about it from a natural sense, when would we actually be active? That's when we are pursuing our meal, when we are looking for berries and nuts, when we are chasing an animal that we want to eat. That's when our body is naturally supposed to be active. That's when it produces cortisol and all of this. And that's, by the way, why a lot of people feel more energized when they are doing fasting and stuff, because their body is basically screaming for food. So it goes into that sort of hunter mode where it needs to find food. That's when we want to be active. But think about what your ancestors would do after they've eaten a meal. There's no more gathering to do. There's no more hunting to do. You basically just have to sit still and sleep. And that's why you get so tired often after eating, which is again another issue that a lot of people have, that we really shouldn't get like food fatigue after eating, but that's a whole nother topic. But basically you're supposed to be relaxed after you've eaten. You're not supposed to be active. So I mean, going for a walk is fine. Maybe that'll help you sort of move things around, digest everything a little bit, but it's not generally the right way to think about it, in my opinion. And it's definitely not something that's necessary, and it's definitely not a biohack, as this guy puts it.
4, using mouth tape every night before bed.
Again, another very terrible biohack that I see constantly on the internet. You don't have to use mouth tape to fix your mouth breathing, basically, and all of this. What produces mouth breathing is basically nutritional deficiencies and toxins. So very often when people mouth breathe in their sleep, it's because they have a buildup of mucus. Basically, their lymphatic system is working in overdrive to remove toxins, or there's some kind of detoxification process that's happening. And if you actually help that process and you get rid of the toxins, and you generally have a good microbiome that can neutralize toxins, and if you do all the right principles in that regard, you will naturally become a nasal breather and you won't have to use mouth tape. Keep in mind, it's natural for our body to seek towards the most optimized outcome. But if there are things blocking that, like detoxification processes, or you don't have the correct nutrition, then you're going to start to constantly have to breathe outside of your mouth. And fixing that with just some mouth tape is a very like band-aid solution to that. You want to actually fix the root cause, and you won't have to tape your mouth every time you sleep. So I very much disagree with using mouth tape and stuff like that. It's basically like a band-aid sort of intervention that just you want to fix the root cause. That's what's going to give you so many other different benefits, and you're actually going to be a natural nasal breather.
Forces you to breathe through your nostrils. Number 5, practice a 16-8 intermittent fasting schedule.
So again, we've talked about fasting a lot. Should probably do a whole video about it at this point, but a lot of people, they don't have the correct nutrition and they're way too toxic to do intermittent fasting regularly. You can do it short term, but again, long term, you're going to run into stress and issues and low testosterone and all of this.
Simply put, 16 hours, you're in a fasted state having water and sea salt, 8-hour eating window. Number 6, lift weights at least 3 to 4 times a week. The final tip here.
Again, this is another interesting thing, and I don't necessarily have a problem with what he said here, that you should lift weights or be active or do some sort of exercise 4 times a week. But I do see, again, and we are getting into the stress area again, a lot of people, they over-exercise, especially people who lift. They over-exercise, and ironically, that is contributing to a buildup, again, of cortisol and a hormonal damage that makes it harder for them to repair the damage that they actually do from the exercise, and they get lower testosterone, and they actually in turn get lower muscle growth and all of this because they're basically working out way too much. So you have to really understand rest and really understand the nutrition you need to repair from the exercise, whatever exercise that is. And that's when you're going to see great results from doing basically 4 times a week or something like that. But a lot of people do it way too much. So that is a big issue in our modern world. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that in here. Again, another thing that I work very much with people individually is sort of finding that perfect balance of where you can stress your body to the point that you get muscle breakdown and then rest to the point that you get muscle growth, and then you see basically linear progress and you don't have this low testosterone of being too stressed from all the workouts. A lot of people have this. I see this so many people. So yeah, another very important point.
Here is my favorite one. Get this vitamin in your body every single day, called vitamin G, gratitude. What you appreciate, it appreciates.
That was, yeah, I like that. Vitamin G, gratitude. I mean, that's a whole other area of health that we could talk about, but I definitely agree with that. Be grateful, thank God every day, and you'll have a good life. Let's move on to the next one. So this is Dave Asprey. Again, I've heard of him. I've never really heard what his whole philosophy is and all of that. I think he's the guy who came up with bulletproof coffee, if I'm not remembering wrong. So let's see what he's saying.
Is wrong with the American diet is seed oils. These omega-6 oils, canola, corn, soybean, safflower, sunflower, all this stuff that's in everything at the restaurant and most packaged foods at the grocery store. It's full of these oils. These are the oils that drive insulin resistance. Americans have about 40 times more of that oil in their systems than they should, and it gets built into your tissues. Second thing is industrially raised meat. It's full of xenoestrogens. These are estrogens that make animals fat on 1/3 less calories than normal. You eat industrial animals, they're also full of cortisol. And so you do this, they mess up your gut bacteria, and they're full of glyphosate because it was on the feed. And glyphosate disrupts your gut bacteria, your nervous system activity, and is tied to cancer. And then the third thing would be sugar. If you have a ton of sugar, it's directly harmful. One thing.
This was actually a very good video. Obviously, the first part about seed oils, I think everyone is starting to realize seed oils are just terrible. So definitely true. Then he talks about a very untold story in a lot of health influencers' perspectives, and that is the topic of industrial meat. So a lot of people are talking about going animal-based and eating more meat, but what he says here is extremely accurate. If you're eating industrial conventional meat, you're filling your body with xenoestrogens, antibiotics, even the vaccines and injections that go into these animals, they end up in the meat, they disrupt your gut through all these antibiotic residue things, and they actually give you gut dysbiosis and basically destroy your health slowly. So industrial meat, industrial eggs and all of this is one of the most terrible things you can consume. That's why I constantly talk about the quality aspect, going organic, going biodynamic and all of this. So very surprised to hear this from a supposed biohacker dude. Seems like he's very well researched when it comes to this, and he's actually talking about some important things that actually matter. So very much agree with his whole take on the conventional industrial meat. Then he talks about sugar at the end. Again, we've talked about this previously. Sugar is not the issue in and of itself. Obviously, you don't want to fill your gut with insane amounts of like white refined sugar. But if you have a natural and hardworking and optimized gut, basically, then you can actually extract a lot of energy from basically natural sugars and even things like cane sugar. So again, sugar is not the problem. The problem is that most people don't have the gut levels that they can actually extract those things, and there are a lot of things that we can really do to take our gut to the next level and start eating basically a lot of sugar to get a lot of energy and derive a lot of even nutritional aspects and even build our gut microbiome even more. But again, there are a lot of things we have to do before doing that. So in general, I agree that people should eat less sugar if they don't have an optimized gut. But for people who actually do the right things, sugar is not an enemy, it's our friend. So overall, very good video by Dave Asprey. Very surprised he mentioned the conventional industrial aspect. That's I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to the next one. So I don't know who this guy is, but I believe he's talking about Peter Attia in this video or something like that. So let's see.
They discovered a perfect diet for longevity yet. And I think that the best advice that I found comes from Outlive author Dr. Peter Attia. So the first thing he says is that we should all be eating less. Reducing your caloric intake by fasting or just cutting back has huge benefits.
So this seems like a recurring theme among the sort of biohacking longevity experts, that's doing intermittent fasting and eating less is somehow helpful. And I think obviously for a lot of people coming from a standard American diet and eating way too much, you are going to see huge benefits by implementing like an intermittent fasting 16-8 sort of eating window schedule. But as I keep saying, if you keep this up for months and years and years and years, you're going to run into a lot of issues, and it's not actually the correct way to heal your body, in my opinion, and gain long-lasting high energy levels, high testosterone. This is not how we in nature would achieve like an abundant state within our physiology. It's not by restricting things. It's actually by increasing the nutrition and getting it in a very dense and bioavailable way and in a consistent way. But again, this is a long topic. It's something I teach a lot inside my program and everything. So definitely contact me personally if you want to hear more about what I believe you should doing in terms of intermittent fasting and all of that. But again, yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think it's a misunderstanding on the part of these longevity experts when it comes to intermittent fasting.
It reduces your chances of Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. Now, the other thing we have to do is you gotta prioritize protein. Not getting enough protein, it can lead to a loss of muscle, it can lead to poor bone health, and even worse, your quality of life can suffer.
So again, this is another thing that would never happen on a natural optimized diet. You would never lack protein on a natural ancestrally based diet because you would get all the nutrition your body needs in its natural compounds. So the reason they say you need to eat a lot of protein is because they've basically been scammed into a way of viewing nutrition and the world where you are eating the same, for example, muscle meats every day, you're eating a steak every day, or you are using protein powders and stuff like that. Again, that's a very imbalanced, improper way of getting protein, in my opinion. If you are on a natural, ancestral based diet where you're getting whole foods like raw milk, you're eating bone broth, you're getting a lot of the correct fats in, then you actually don't need as much protein to start your muscle growth, and you'll be surprised how little protein your body needs to actually make stuff like this. So a lot of people are overdoing protein, and they have a misconception of how protein is supposed to work inside the body, and they think if they just throw enough protein at it, it's gonna turn into muscle. But you actually wanna basically optimize the protein conversion, which happens through the gut, as many things do, and that's how we want to combat that, in my opinion. It's not just by throwing too much protein at it, which a lot of these longevity experts and health influencers in general nowadays are telling you to do.
So next, you gotta use a continuous glucose monitor. CGMs show you how your body responds to carbs in real time, and you know what? They're incredibly convenient. I have mine hooked up to my phone, so whenever I'm eating, I can actually watch what happens to my glucose as I'm eating it.
Again, this is a very neurotic, to me almost psychotic way of that you have to constantly monitor what your body is doing, and that information you're getting on your phone in terms of your glucose is actually somehow a correct representation of what your body is doing. Your body has so many different reasons to do things in certain environments. If there's a lot of electromagnetic radiation, your glucose will literally be impacted by that. There are so many variables that we can't use something as simple as this to just say, oh, my glucose spiked by 100, now I have to basically eat much less carbs, or I have to do this and that. Again, I think it's a very neurotic way of viewing health and the body. Your body already knows how to handle that stuff. It does nothing by itself in random, basically. It's not something you have to optimize. You basically have to give your body the best conditions through an optimized gut, through optimized microbiomes like your lung microbiome, your mouth microbiome. Everything in our body is a microbiome, and when we optimize these things, our glucose and everything else is going to fall into check no matter what we eat, almost. Obviously, provided it's good quality and natural whole foods and all this. So let's look at this guy. He's called Dr. Valder Longo. I don't really know if this guy is someone who's prominent in this field. I just sort of found this video. We're maybe getting into the weirder sort of area of the internet here, but let's see what he has to say.
Carbohydrate diet is bad for you in general, unless it's a plant-based, low carbohydrate diet. Low carbohydrate diet and high protein are not good for you. It should be the other way around. Low protein, high carbohydrate is better.
Low protein, high carbohydrate. And he's talking about plant-based again and all this stuff. Obviously, we've talked about that and how that's never going to be helpful long term, but it is interesting. He's talking about what I just talked about with protein, a low protein, high carbohydrate diet, and that's actually a diet that can be very helpful for a lot of people when they get into the correct optimized gut state, that their body is able to use a lot of the sugars, a lot of the carbohydrates, turn them into energy and nutrition, and start doing things like glucogenesis, I think is what it's called, turning basically carbohydrates into protein and stuff like that. And that's where we don't need a lot of protein. That's what I just talked about. So it's a very interesting area that he's touching on here. Again, I think we have very different ideas of how to achieve this, because he's talking about plant-based and all of this, but I think he's sort of moving towards the right area. I don't think going keto and cutting out carbohydrates is the way to go. A lot of people do that because they don't realize the reason they can't tolerate carbs and stuff is because their gut is messed up. So for some people it's helpful, but they're just not realizing the root cause. But let's see what else he has to say.
For lifespan to be an 80% carbohydrate diet than to be in a low carbohydrate diet. In the longevity diet, we talk about fats, yes, but certain type of fats, the high olive oil, high nut diet is better. Prominent experts will say go to a no-fat diet, no matter what it is. Sure, it seems to be true, better to not have saturated fats, animal fats, and again, the epidemiology agrees with that. But when we're talking about these monounsaturated fats, olive oil, nuts, probably certain fish like salmon, that seems to be consistently associated with living longer. If a low carbohydrate diet is not so good for you, let's look around. A low carbohydrate.
Okay, so he basically gets into the very mainstream area here of the end of like the Mediterranean sort of perspective, that you need to cut out saturated fat, and the whole Ansel Keys hypothesis that was popularized in the 80s, somewhere around that saturated fat was evil and we need to consume monosaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, seed oils, very bad advice in general. He does mention like olive oil and these sort of nut fats, which again are very oxidized way of getting your fat. I guess extra virgin olive oil is a decent option, but again, you're not going to get any of the nutrition that you would get from like butter or beef tallow or animal fats, basically. So he's basically just talking about the mainstream narrative of animal fat and all of that is evil, but as we all know, if you watch my other videos, that is a big scam, so I'm not really going to talk much more about that. Let's look at the last video here. I just found this. I don't know who this is, but I just wanted to hear a woman's perspective for once, so let's hear what she has to say.
So here's a great meal for you to help with your longevity, including those important nutrients, quercetin and resveratrol. So have some grass-fed steak, a little bit of red wine, of course, for that resveratrol, and some onions and mushrooms, because that will supply your quercetin. That combination is going to help with the bioavailability and help with your longevity. Follow me for more natural health tips.
Follow her for more natural health tips, guys. Honestly, this was a better tip than a lot of the videos we have watched so far. Some grass-fed beef and some red wine. There are some interesting compounds in there. I don't believe in the whole resveratrol aspect of it, but basically grass-fed beef, obviously very complete nutrition, complete protein, amino acids, a lot of B vitamins, and basically a very whole nutritional food for our body to absorb, and one of the most nutrient-dense foods that we can eat on a regular basis. And she's talking about red wine here, which is another interesting thing, is the aspect of alcohol. So generally alcohol is very toxic to the body. I think most of us realize that if we've ever had a hangover, that's basically a detoxification process. But when you think about what alcohol actually is a very distilled sort of almost vinegar sort of state of fermented break down molecules. So alcohol in very small amounts can actually help you digest things much easier. And that's, in my opinion, why a lot of people have seen benefits in just having a small amount of beer or a small amount of red wine with their meal, for example, because these things can actually help us break down the foods we are consuming. And a lot of people need that help to consume foods. And there are even like a whole thing called digestives, which is basically alcohol that you drink to easily absorb your food. And I believe in that. I think it's a real thing. But again, there are all the negative aspects of alcohol and what it does to your liver in terms of toxicity. So again, you want to fix the root cause instead of relying on basically alcohol. And it's very easy to overdo that and get the negative aspects to it. Then she talks about just mushrooms and onions. I have no issues with that, but I don't know what she was trying to basically argue with that. Yeah, it's a decent thing. It's a very low toxic foods that you can use to enhance the flavor and everything of your whatever you're eating. So in general, this was a very good meal. If she added some kind of carbohydrate sauce in there, like the potatoes, sourdough bread, or some rice or something like that, that would be a very good meal in my opinion. Very clean. You have the mushrooms, you have the onion for flavor, you have the nutrition from the grass-fed steak, you have the rice, and you have the potatoes for the starch and the carbohydrate energy and to feed the gut bacteria. And then you might have some red wine or something like that to help digest everything. And if it's like a natural red wine without sulfates, if it's like made organically and all of this, then that could be a very helpful, good meal. So props to this lady. That was some decent advice, some very simple advice. And that's basically it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. I basically just want to give my view of this whole biohacking field and all the things that are thrown out there that I think are sort of baseless and not actually what's going to help you take your health to the next level. And if you want my personal help and want my advice on how to take your specific situation to the highest level possible, how you can eat ancestrally, how you can optimize your gut so you can extract 10 times the energy of everything you eat, including sugar and stuff like that, you can book a free 30-minute health call by the link in the description, and I can help you out a little bit, and we can talk about an action plan where you can really start thriving and start moving away from these sort of band-aid solutions that a lot of these experts talk about. So that link is down below, and other than that, stay healthy and see you next time.